On today's episode of Locked On Suns, there have been a ton of different versions of the Phoenix Suns this season. Who are they now, heading into a big playoff series against the Minnesota Timberwolves? Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 7 seasons, a writer at Dime Magazine, the host of the Just Basketball Show, and I create written and video content for the Locked On Suns Insider community, which you can sign up for at the link in the show description below, or by visiting joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSuns. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen to kick off your Tuesday. Welcome in. Wherever you're finding us, hit that follow or subscribe button. Get a new episode in your feed every single Monday through Friday. We're free and available everywhere, including YouTube. So become an everydayer. Join the thousands of listeners. 7,000 subscribers on YouTube we just hit. Become one of the everydayers. I will deliver an episode. You will get the Suns content you need. That is how this works. Get locked onto the Phoenix Suns from here on out. We're at the point of the season where I don't know what that time period is anymore, but that means you should do it because this is the most exciting time of year for that reason. Today's episode, guys, is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I have to admit it, I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on the classic Monopoly game. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now, free, on the App Store or Google Play Store. Alrighty, so who are the Suns now? That's what we're trying to answer today. Talk about Grayson Allen's extension at the end, but there's a few ways to approach that question, right? There's a few ways to answer that question, but I have some numbers to kick us off because it feels an awful lot like last season, if I'm being honest with you, where you could split the Suns season up into a bunch of different sub-seasons based on injuries, the Durant trade and everything else. This year, largely just injuries, but in particular, Bradley Beal's injury. The Suns stampede through the Pistons in a preseason game, score 45-plus points in the first quarter, and then all of a sudden Bradley Beal is out. And they would not really get back on track until after Christmas, December 28th. At that point in time, the Suns were 500. These numbers are courtesy of Shane Young from Forbes. He's been on the podcast. He lives in Phoenix, covers the team. 500 record, 15-15, heading into the December 28th return of Bradley Beal. At that point in time, they were 16th in net rating, 13th in offense, 18th in defense. Basically, mediocre, middling, whatever way you sliced it. Since December 28th, the Suns have a 34-18 record. They have the 7th offense, the 10th defense, and the 7th net rating. For anybody who might need their memory jogged, that is, of course, just about where the Suns landed in offense and defense the year they went to the NBA Finals. Right on the outside, right on the edge of the top 10 in defense, middle of that top 10 area in offense, top 5 in net rating or so, and they went to the Finals that year. That win-loss record of, again, 34-18 since that day when Beal came back. Now, he didn't play in every single one of those games, but just using that as the line in the sand here, they are on a 54-win pace. Now, looking back a little bit at last season and how it also was a little disjointed, and thinking about not only the 54-win pace the Suns have been on since late December, but also what they ended up with in terms of wins, period, which, of course, is 49. That's four more than they had last year. And so that brings us to their overall numbers this year. 49 wins, as I just said, 9th in offense overall, 12th in defense overall. So clearly, those final 52 games of the season, that's a bigger sample, so this isn't a huge surprise to say, but that is much closer to what the Suns are than the first portion of the year, okay? As a team, you look post All-Star break, 16-11. Now, what would that be in terms of a win pace? That would be a 49 win pace. So you're right back to, okay, we really kind of are getting a grip of what this team is, despite it maybe feeling, not maybe, it certainly felt up and down. But yet, you lock in and things start to feel a little bit more understandable. Now, there are also some funny elements of this, right? So pre and post All-Star break, identical amount of turnovers per game. Fewer forced turnovers per game. A little more assists, a little more three-point percentage, fewer free throw attempts, right? So higher three-point attempts, all these things, right? That's not a surprise to anybody. And that's just pre-post All-Star. That's not even that December point in time. But obviously, we have seen this team become a little more balanced, become a little bit more quick and decisive in terms of how it plays offense. Not so reliant on Kevin Durant to save the day as an offensive player, which is why you see some of those free throw attempts go down and some of the threes go up. The Suns on the season owned the free throw line. They really made a dent on the offensive glass and improved on the defensive glass. And they struggled mightily with turnovers. That was true basically no matter what portion of the season you're looking at. All right, and then of course along the way we had these very massive swings, ups and downs, right? As recently as literally last week when they clinched their seeding and avoided the play-in game. You go from one of the most embarrassing moments of the season in that first half against the Clippers on Tuesday night of last week, all the way to an incredible fourth quarter against the Kings and a dominating wire-to-wire win over the Minnesota Timberwolves, both on the road. That encapsulates everything you need to know about this team, right? So, in a way, it's not super complicated, even though it has been so topsy-turvy, I guess. I don't use that word ever, but that one, I guess, fits here, and I'll use it here. It's been so random. It's been so unpredictable. That's just maybe true. Maybe this is a volatile team. Maybe this is a team that is going to have high highs and low lows. Maybe this is a team that is going to lose, let's say, they win a road game in Minnesota and it feels awesome. Maybe they drop a game 3 or a game 4 at home. Just the same, right? But you can't argue with 49 wins. You can't argue with basically being top 10 in offense and in defense over the course of the season, just outside the top 10 in defense, and the 8th best net rating in the league. That would tell you this team has a puncher's chance at a deep postseason run here. And in closing, this team is exactly who we think they are, especially if you look at the point in time when they got their whole team, in particular Bradley Beal, back, or even just post-All-Star break, which has been, again, a very volatile point in the season. You've had multiple embarrassing losses along the way, and yet it adds up to a competitive, interesting, potentially dangerous team. History tells us this is not impossible. History tells us this is not unique, let's say, right? So, down the stretch of the Raptors season in 2018-19, you following me? We're jumping around a little. We're going back in history. The Raptors had that season where they had to load manage Kawhi Leonard after trading for him. What do? Well, they have a 7-game win streak in early February that goes basically the whole month of February over and through the All-Star break. They later have a 5-game win streak and basically take themselves from they did start hot, but they had a lull in the middle of the season. They hit the ground running heading into the playoffs, beat the Magic in 5 games, beat the Sixers in 7 games with the Kawhi Leonard miracle shot, Bucks in 6, and then the Warriors in 6. So they found their groove with some midseason trades and Kawhi, the process of getting him healthy working. They go on to win a championship. I understand I'm picking a little bit of, not picking nits, but I'm being selective here. You have the Lakers in 2019-20 with Frank Vogel. Now, they started with a 7-game win streak, and then a 10-game win streak, and then a 7-game win streak. So at one point, they were 24-3. But then they end up at the break when the season gets paused at 49-14, sorry. So the rest of the way, they go 25-11. So they start blazing hot. They slow down a little bit. They get to the bubble. They use those games as really just tune-ups, and then they win every Western Conference series in 5 games, beat the Miami Heat in 6 games. Another team that was put together hastily. Now, they started really strong and slowed down later, but then they were able to get it together. The Brooklyn Nets, which Kevin Durant, of course, was on, struggled with injuries a ton. They have 2 months into the season, they finally have an 8-game win streak, then a 6-game win streak, but they finished the regular season 48-24. They win 2/3 of their games, right? That is, in an 82-game season, basically a 55-win pace. When they get to the playoffs, they beat the Celtics in 5 and then take the Bucks to 7 without Kyrie Irving. All I'm saying is it's not always smooth. Those 3 teams I pointed to had much more successful regular seasons overall than the Suns, but they had ups and downs. They had lulls. They hit their groove when the postseason started, and they made it work. The Suns can do that. Despite how weird it's felt, despite how bad some of the losses have been, the big picture tells us, history tells us, the Suns have an opportunity here. Let's talk about Bradley Beal next and what he is, because that's a lot different than it might have been in October as well. First, today's show brought to you by Betterhelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get things off of our chest. Big or small, certain things can really start to get to you, and it's important to let them out, especially to somebody who's unbiased about your life, a separate person, a person who doesn't know the baggage that you might hold. So today, I want to tell you how I really feel about something, and you might even be thinking about the same thing this week. All right. For me, the emotional, deeper part of myself this week, I'm bummed that the Suns are going up against Anthony Edwards because he is, outside of Phoenix, probably my favorite player in the NBA. I would love in a vacuum for a great player, a young guy who I believe in a lot and enjoy watching, to have an opportunity in the playoffs to improve, get a step further, do all of those things. Instead, now I'm up against, I don't want that to happen. And it is a little bit of a bummer. A rock in a hard place, so to speak. Therapy can be different for everybody. Most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports teams and who they match up with in the playoffs, but it's important to get everything off your chest every once in a while. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Keeping it rolling here. Who is Bradley Beal? Now, not what do we think of Bradley Beal's career or what do we think of the trade or any of that. No, we're in April. The Suns made the playoffs. A whole season happened. We know some things. What do we know? Who is Bradley Beal? I think is a worthy question to ask. Here's where I start. All right, and I want to remind everybody to check out the Locked On Suns Insiders, where you can get my daily, each game, a video breakdown of 1/4 of that game that decided that game. I'm going to have the watch back of the first quarter against Minnesota here on Sunday's game on Friday. So I'm giving you guys all week to sign up, and then I will give you my thoughts on how the first quarter of this past game played out as a last little bit of preview to get you ready for the playoff series. All right, sound good? Sign up at the link in the show description below. Click that button. It'll take you. You sign up, and you input your info, and you start getting texts from me every single day. Or you can sign up at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSuns. All right, here's where I start. Bradley Beal, what is he? Touches. All right, touches. That's it. How many per game? Prior to the All-Star break, Devin Booker, 73 touches per game. Kevin Durant, 72 touches per game. Those two basically neck and neck. Bradley Beal, 62 touches per game. Okay? You following me here? Post All-Star break. Devin Booker still leads the team. His actually go up a little bit, 75 touches per game. However, Kevin Durant falls down to 70, so he loses a couple. And then Bradley Beal rises all the way from 65 to 72. So not only does Beal go up 7 touches per game from pre to post All-Star break, he also is basically equivalent with the other two. So it really became a big three, okay? And you look at Beal's numbers just as an individual, box score production, pre-post All-Star break. I know this is not perfect. I get it. You just bear with me. It's hard to break things down, everything by December 28th. But pre-All-Star break, you had Beal solid, right? About league average efficiency, 18, 4, and 5. Post-All-Star break, you have Beal at absurd efficiency. 65 true shooting percentage, 52% from 3, even making free throws way better. He has as many assists basically in 23 games post-All-Star break as he did in 30 games pre-All-Star break, and a lot fewer turnovers. And of course, he is getting after it on the defensive end. The Suns pre-All-Star break with Beal on the court limited opponents to, well, not really limited. They held opponents to 119 points per 100 possessions. Post-All-Star break, 116. If you're keeping track, he had a +7 net rating. Post-All-Star break, at the beginning of the year, -7 pre-All-Star break. I threw a lot at you. The point is, Bradley Beal, it's night and day. He improved over the course of the season, and his upward trajectory during that time is a big reason why the Suns had a big upward trajectory during that time. Now, I still don't think Bradley Beal is the point guard of this team. All right? I don't really care. It doesn't really matter, but I think it's worth at least exploring. That's the final big number that changed. 4.5 assists per game pre-All-Star, 6 assists per game post-All-Star. But here's the thing. As I mentioned, Devin Booker's touches also went up in that span. Devin Booker's assists per game pre-All-Star, post-All-Star were about the same. So again, the touches tell us the story here much more than the point guard dialogue or assists per game or who had the biggest moments and any of that. This is a big three. The Suns are at their best when they are finding ways for all three players to impact the game on offense, on and off the ball. All right? I think both of the Cleveland games down the stretch of the season, I think the first of the 2 Pelicans games down the stretch, those are multiple good examples of what that can look like at its maximum balanced, most spontaneous, unpredictable form. Okay? And that is what Beal unlocked. Beal did not take the team over and become the point guard. And no, it doesn't have to be all that. The point is, he did exactly what they brought him in to do. To me, that is the story of this stretch run, more so than any of the other stuff. Okay? Bradley Beal came in, he increased his playmaking, which, by the way, we knew he would have to do regardless of who you want to call the point guard. He took over 4 threes a game, which continued pre- and post-All-Star, but made a lot more of them, and took on more difficult defensive assignments. He averaged almost a block per game. Now, that 5-block game the other night certainly helped, but that's what Beal had to be, and he became it. A more, I guess, he had to change his approach on offense, more passing, more threes, and he had to embrace a higher level of difficulty on the defensive end. Check, check, and check. He did all of those things. And so heading into the playoffs, we talked about what the Suns are. Up and down, unpredictable, but largely very good, and on a path that might actually be more familiar across NBA history than we think. Bradley Beal, if I'm thinking, what is he? Well, he's exactly what we thought he would need to be. That's not to say getting there was easy, that it doesn't deserve a lot of credit. It does. But he actually is just doing all the things that he had to. He's embracing his role. He's sacrificing. And he's clearly galvanizing this team as a result. Last 5 games of the season would lead you to believe there's even more meat on that bone, right? 33-5 on 68% against the Pelicans, 26-5-4 on 53% against the Clippers, huge fourth quarter against the Kings, and then 36-6-5 on 67% shooting against the Wolves. If that is still there and he can do the other stuff we just talked about, you're looking at a real, true third part of a big three. Not just the guy who buys into the little stuff. We'll see. More to talk about in terms of how this matchup could affect that as the week goes on, but Beal is exactly where you want him to be, and that's a very good thing. All right, that is the meat of our show. Grayson Allen gave us some delicious news to chew on as well here. My thoughts on the Allen extension and why it was a home run for the Suns coming up next. First, today's show brought to you by Monopoly Go. I've been told I'm a competitive person, and I have a competitive side. I think we all do. I think that's fine. My competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. Downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities, and bringing in the dough. But the best part is messing with your friends. Charge them rent on your iconic properties, just like the classic Monopoly. Rob their vaults of riches for yourself. And get the bragging rights of being atop the Monopoly Go leaderboards. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all around the world in timed tournaments and earn huge rewards. Of course, that's good too. So get in on the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play Store. Closing out the show. Grayson Allen signed bright and early Monday morning a new contract extension for 4 years and $70 million. All right. And so let's get the details out of the way first before I talk about what my thoughts are on it, which you already heard me say. I think it's great. I think it's a big success, but it's more specific than that, and we'll get there. The contract is starting at $15.6 million in year one. So that might just sound like duh, but it's not. A lot of teams structure things different ways, and it doesn't always just start at a low number and elevate into a higher number and add up to 70. That's not how every team does it, and especially in an era right now where teams are mapping out aprons and luxury taxes and when are we going to have to pay this guy how much, all that stuff, right? You just heard it with Drew Holiday of the Celtics. He's taking a little bit of a haircut in year one, and that is allowing the Celtics to save a touch of money, and then it elevates and escalates from there, maybe in a period when they may not have to pay Kristaps Porzingis or, maybe before the Derek White contract kicks in. Well, all that stuff. Doesn't really matter. This is not a Celtics show, but that's just an example. So what the Suns did is started him at the very lowest that they possibly could in year one. And this contract, believe it or not, I know it's, I'm not saying this to freak anybody out. It's just the truth. This contract now goes longer because it'll kick in next season than any player on the Suns outside of Devin Booker. So Kevin Durant, only under contract for 2 years after this. Bradley Beal, only under contract for 2, and then he has a player option. Book is under contract for 4. Nurkic only for 2. Little only for 3, on down the line. Okay? So Grayson Allen, the biggest part of this payday, right? It'll multiply by 5% every season. So next year, you're talking about Allen making, let's see, 1.05 times 15.4 on my little Google calculator here, 16.2 million, and then on down the line. All right. That means the biggest part of this payday, again, will come in when only Booker is under contract, right? Allen will be making, in year 4, $17.8 million, but Book's $62 million is all that's left. That really benefits the Suns, okay? Still, you can't ignore the luxury tax implications here. Allen's contract alone, despite it starting at the lowest it possibly can, will cost the Suns $79 million in payroll and tax, which adds up to, along with all the other pre-existing numbers that already were in place given Allen not being on the books, the whole luxury tax payroll payment will be $310 million, the highest in the NBA. Just worth mentioning for how far cry it is from when Robert Sarver was around, right? I joked on Twitter like Sarver would have offered 2 years, $20 million. And people were like, no, Sarver would have traded Grayson Allen for cash at the deadline, even during an awesome season, to not even have to negotiate with the guy. You know, obviously, jokes aside, that is how far we've come. Robert Sarver deserved to be gone for a whole host of bigger reasons than that, but it is still good that he is, because when you are, as I started the whole show out by saying, a team with at least a puncher's chance of a title here, you have to keep it together. And despite Allen's 4 years being one of the longer contracts now on the books, everybody's under contract for at least the next 2 seasons beyond this. So you're still talking about a window, and you got to keep that window open. So for all those reasons, it's a very, very good deal. It keeps a good team together, and it keeps an important part of this Suns squad who makes defenses pay for leaving him open, can make decisions with the ball in his hands, at least is a serviceable and passable point of attack defender against guards, right? It's not, Beal has stepped up into the primary role in those matchups. Durant has it in him. We know Book can dig deep and get there too, but Allen at least being a C+, B-, whatever you think of him, type of point of attack defender on even the second or third best player on an opposing team, right? Take this Minnesota matchup. He's probably going to be guarding Mike Conley quite a bit. It's nice to have a decent defender against Mike Conley on top of the three-point shooting and all the offensive stuff. So Allen locked in, nice fifth piece. Maybe he doesn't start forever, but you know you can trust him. You can say goodbye to Eric Gordon potentially, right? It opens all these doors. That being said, I think you also have to put a little bit into perspective of how Allen got here and some of the decisions the Suns didn't make along the way, right? So you're talking about a situation here where you rewind 18 months, okay? The Suns played hardball with Cam Johnson. Remember that? We all thought, you guys are botching this, you're screwing this. Why not just give him the money? You just came off of a best season in franchise history, best regular season, right? Give the man his money. Stop being cheap. You know, this was still Sarver. This was, I guess, technically not Sarver. This was, Garvin and all that junk during the investigation. But you get me. Well, Cam Johnson now is in Brooklyn on a 4-year, $90 to potentially $95 million contract. Had another injury-riddled season where it seems like he has plateaued. Meanwhile, and this is not apples to apples, right? Because the Suns traded Johnson for Durant. There's no world where they're picking directly between Cam and Grayson, but it still matters because maybe if you did sign Cam to that extension, he doesn't become involved in the KD trade. Maybe you do a different salary there, Shamet or something else, and you end up, keeping Cam on a big salary, and he does stay here. Instead, they move him on the smaller contract. Brooklyn gives him the big payday. The Suns probably had in their back pocket, hey, we still need a shooter. We still need a guy who can space the floor around our super team, so to speak. And they go out and get him in the Ayton trade, right? And they seem to circle Grayson. Now, there was a potential, I guess they didn't really know who it was going to be, and they had already agreed to it anyway. I believe the other alternative, based on some reporting at ESPN from the Lillard negotiations, which the Suns swooped into, they thought it might be Victor Oladipo. Okay, that would have been a very different player, and also he didn't play much this season, so maybe that would have been something you flip. I don't know. But it definitely sounds like, from that same reporting, the Suns were really crossing their fingers it would be Grayson. And then, of course, when it was him, they were very appreciative and thankful and happy. So that sequence of moves, not paying Cam, then including Cam in the trade, and then getting Grayson, and now paying Grayson, you end up with a more consistent player who is probably overall a better fit, given that Cam and KD would have to defend the same players most of the time, and a cheaper player. It is the type of sequence of moves and the type of evaluations you have to nail when your roster is expensive and when you have limited resources to improve it. Imagine if the Suns had gotten Oladipo and maybe they flip him for, I don't know who your preferred shooter is, Doug McDermott. I mean, whatever, This team would not be as good. They would have played one of their last cards with that Ayton move, and they would be still wiggling around trying to find that guy. Now they have that guy long-term. They nailed the trade. They nailed the contract, and it's one less thing to worry about. It's one more surefire piece on your roster that you can build forward with. So absolute home run. The willingness to pay is huge. Getting the player right, equally big. And it's one less thing the Suns have to worry about going into the postseason, right? I don't know if the Royce O'Neal thing gets done. He's a vet. He's a pro. He knows the deal now. But Grayson, you could see it affecting him. Confidence, questioning, locker room, hey, I want mine. Grayson's not that kind of guy, but it's just nice to get it over with. All right, that'll wrap us up. More to come throughout the week. We will talk more in specifics about the matchup, but there was a lot going on today. I wanted to spend a little time looking back, so there we go. Olympics news, maybe we'll get there. Ben Beacon of Locked On Wolves will be here for a crossover preview. Steven Perjone will break down all the X's and O's to close out the week. I'm excited. I know you are. Hit follow, hit subscribe, get a show in your feed every single day, and I'll catch you guys tomorrow.